So you
the
can,
videos itself, I guess how does the grading work? Or like, what do you focus on in the grading?
I mean, it's hard to fully automatically turn like written feedback into a grade, but
Oh yeah,
you
of
know,
course.
I mean, I base it on the same feedback that I give in the, comments. So it's like, I guess if I were to introspect about it, I'd say like, maybe I have a mental model of like, okay, what have people done in the past? What have people done in this particular offering of the course? How does the quality compare? How does it fit with the assignment intention? And which things were going well, which not, and
Maybe I didn't word that well. What I
I
meant
don't
was
know.
like, for instance, you could say like, okay, when I'm looking at the video, like the most important thing is to be in visualization. Like if you're gonna spend your time, that's where the tension is. And like
yes.
the least important thing is probably the video, like a professional left take a few time for that great, but like that's not where the time
Got
is
it.
spent. That's kind of more.
Yeah, so I would say important to have solid analysis and visualization.
Okay.
So that's maybe a minimum viable product, but then to like boost it up, I think, so if you do like some analysis, you'll probably get somewhere in the A or B range,
Right.
as long as it's vaguely plausible and whatever. But then if you like tell a compelling narrative, that'll, bump you up to, I guess the more compelling and more interesting and engaging, et cetera, the better you do. So I guess probably the narrative is usually what differentiates like okay videos from really great videos.
Okay.
And then, visualizations can help augment a narrative. So it's not just the words that you say, it's what you show people.
Visualizations in the graphic, like visual.
Yeah, either graphics you make or, if you splice in video clips or
Okay.
pictures or stuff like that to help augment what you're saying, or illustrations. Yeah.
Do you have a preference for like animated stuff versus stock videos and stock footage versus like drawing on, or like typically do you think one really works better than the other?
No, it really depends on the story. I think there have been some really effective videos in past years with like spliced together video footage.
Okay.
But I don't think that's a requirement. I think I mean, even in, I think both of you had like videos where like your video about your dog and your video about the like language immersion program, both had like zooming in pictures and stuff like that. I thought that was effective. Eliza, welcome.
So you just, I guess, need some sense.
I think it's helpful. It's not strictly necessary.
Okay.
Yeah, Kareem.
Would you recommend working on these last ones as a bigger boost? Because I noticed that probably if you're like more than like just you could probably make separate stories together. But then we have to be under 5 minutes as well.
Yeah, so I noticed almost all of your stories like kind of went past 5 minutes, and that's probably because I said the 5 minutes isn't a like strict cutoff. I think I would try to keep it around 5 minutes. Like the point of the 5 minute kind of guideline is to give you like a target to aim for, which tells you like how much stuff can you cram into your story and have it be like digestible and bite-sized and roughly within the scope of the assignment. If you go too much longer, it's like you might be making it more complicated, adding in, a level of detail you don't necessarily need. If you make it too much shorter, maybe you're not putting enough. So like, I wouldn't use just like the strictness of the length as like a free license to just make your videos however long. I'd still aim for 5 minutes, but yeah, but it does, if it's like 5 minutes and 3 seconds, then that's fine. If it's 6 minutes, that could be fine, but like just probably 10 minutes might be too long. I mean, it's going to be, that's very different than 5 minutes. Yes.
I guess just dawned on me was like, so like for our video, we just have a couple other people, like we just have the wrong audience. Because we're probably gonna have to completely rewrite our scripts and everything, can we just use our original video we used for assignment 4 for a different one of the later module stories?
I think so. Yeah, that could work.
Okay.
Yeah, and that would probably work well for a different story. Yeah, so if you want to go out of order, yeah.
Well, I just mean, because like,
Yeah, so
I
then-
feel like for that
Yeah.
actually would be pretty good, but like for these.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a good idea. So, yeah. So you'll have to submit it in a slightly different way, but yeah, that's a good idea to make use of that work. So then you'd have to do, like, obviously each video will only count for one assignment, but if you wanted to like redo assignment 4 and then like in this part of the course, then
Yeah.
that could work well. And then you're,
And then you made a few comments of things that we could change, like adding a certain graphic, we can add those things in.
yes.
The original one.
Yeah, and then the kind of mismatch of audience wouldn't apply. So that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to start part 2 of our course, which is kind of like an open format, has an open format design where so in part 1 of the course, you kind of built up the tools for that, some minimum viable set of tools for making stories and like analyzing data and then critiquing stories. And so, hopefully you've taken something away from that part of the course. And then for the rest of the course, we'll be applying what you learned in part 1. And the topic space that you can explore is like the set of all data sets humans have ever collected that you have access to or can access to. It can access. So on the Storytelling with Data GitHub page, here, actually, let me share my screen so that it gets captured on Zoom. Oh, I can't minimize Zoom. Lovely. Okay. On the GitHub page, I've included like where to find nice data sets. So these are some suggestions for like places that students in past years and me and my own research have had good luck finding like interesting data sets. So Kaggle is like a machine learning blog that is run by Google. It's a really neat resource. In addition to hosting a lot of interesting data sets, they also run like there are nearly always dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of kind of contests that are aimed at basically like finding interesting patterns in data. And if you wanted to, you could make a story that's like an entry for one of those contests. And some of them are paid, like will pay quite well. So, I've seen, I think the biggest payoff was like $1 million reward. But they're like frequently in the like tens of thousands of dollars range. And then sometimes smaller contests will be like $50 or $100. But, you know, the people you're competing against are like professional data scientists and that sort. So it's not easy to win the contest, but it could be interesting to make an entry.
Where are you finding this feature for?
This is just on, so you can see the address here. It's just on the Storytelling with Data GitHub page.
Okay.
So just scroll down and it's right at the bottom here.
Okay, thank you.
538 is like a kind of stats blog. They became popular doing like election prediction forecasting. So 538 is like the number of electoral votes in the US presidential election. But they have all kinds of interesting analyses on lots of different topics. So, and at various points, like at one point they were owned by ESPN and did a lot of sports stuff. Now I think they're owned by ABC, and so they do sports and just like general interest stuff and politics. Awesome Public Data Sets is like a curated set of just all kinds of interesting and even potentially uninteresting data sets on pretty much any topic you can imagine. The World Bank and World Health Organizations have like interesting kind of worldwide data sets, often with, you know, related to topics that are, well, I guess the World Health Organization is mostly about health stuff. World Bank, they've got, you know, maybe a focus on financial stuff, but also, you know, kind of any factor that affects the world economies. So like climate, natural resources, like policy, that sort of thing. Google Public Data Explorer is kind of like a search engine for free public data sets. That's can be really useful. And then Amazon has like another similar but less extensive version of that. So all these are potential places to find data, and then just searching the web if you have some particular topic that's not covered by any of these sources is another way to find free open data sets. Yes, Allison, and then Kareem, you're just scratching your head?
I was
Okay.
looking at just like looking at 531, and it seems like a couple of them are like at least a year or two old. How recent should we be trying to use for the data?
Just do something interesting. It doesn't have to be from 2022. It can be really anything. There's a really like fun data set of like Bob Ross paintings, I think, in the 538. Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, so Bob Ross, you know, he's been gone for a few years now, but still interesting to look at his paintings. You could tell a story about that, like which colors does he like to use? What are the themes of his paintings? That sort of thing. And then, you know, you could look at election data, which, I mean, you could pick a recent election or a distant election. 538 has quite a variety of stuff, like Daily Show guests. I think this is when Jon Stewart was running the Daily Show. Yeah. Let's see, Avengers. So something about the Avengers movies. College majors. There's like chess data, like about chess games. Yeah, there's lots of stuff on movie transcripts are really fun to look at. I think Fawn-Marie, you had mentioned you're interested in natural language processing models. So like in my lab, one of the things we do is look at movie transcripts and stories and that sort of thing and apply these models that try to turn like the text of what happens in a story into a like mathematical description of what happens so that you can like compare how is the plot changing over time? How do different stories relate? Are there like particularly effective ways of telling stories or constructing movies that will get you money in the box office or get people to buy your book or be engaged by your book, or make your story particularly memorable or course lecture particularly engaging. So lots of stuff there, etc. Yeah. So the kind of two ways that people have, yes, Emily.
Oh, this was kind of like off topic, so I'm gonna ask you the second one.
Sure, yeah. So I just want to mention like the two general strategies people have used in the past to find story topics for this part of the course is the first is like direct. So find, say I'm interested in like movie data. And so maybe I want to know what makes a successful movie, like in terms of, box office dollars. So, if that's your question, you need to find like movies, how much each made in the box office, and maybe some features of different movies or something like that. If you're interested in like which actors are involved, what's the plot, what's the style of the movie or the genre, who's directing it. So that question kind of points to a data set, and then you just have to track down the data set, and then you get to explore. The other, so that's like approach one. Approach two is kind of an indirect approach. You could say, like Fan-Marie mentioned at the end of last class, I'm interested in natural language processing. So there's a ton of stuff that can be used for natural language processing. I mean, when we search the web, natural language processing gets applied to our searches. When we talk on the phone or send text messages, our friends at Google and in the government are kindly listening in on us and helping to catalog what we say and do. When we upload videos to YouTube, our audio is being transcribed by Google servers and it becomes searchable using natural language processing. When we interact with like our assistants on our phones, that's natural language processing. So there's a lot of interesting stuff there. You could say, I want to learn some technique. And that doesn't necessarily imply one specific data set or even a specific category of data set. But if you're excited about learning some method, then that can help you kind of narrow the search. And, as a class, we can help brainstorm what sorts of data sets might you be interested in. And then particularly if I'm familiar with the technique you want to learn about, I can potentially point you to data sets also, or help you like focusing on your specific question. Did you have a question related to that, Fan-Marie?
For me, like it's not, I have like specific topic I have in mind for the 3 next videos. But the problem is that because they are too specific, and then sometimes I cannot find a big data set for it. I have to like maybe search for the papers where they have the tables, but not yet the visualization part. And I can do that, or it's better if I can find like a larger data set.
I mean, there's no size requirement of a data set, but it's useful for you to be able to like make some sort of, you want to be able to visualize it in some way. So if you have a table, that's better than starting from a graph or something like that. Yeah. Like if you're starting from the point where you're like, here's a table, and then the way I'm visualizing it is I'm just like plotting the heights of bars set by entries of cells in the table. It's not that, I mean, that can be useful as a way to visualize the data, but it's not so much of an analysis per se. Whereas if you're like taking the data that was used to generate the table, and then you're turning that into a bar graph, then that's more of like an analysis sort of thing. So the more directly you can interact with the like raw measurements that someone, ideally a human, like collected, or something programmed by a human collected. You know, that'd be useful. Emily, did you have a question?
Yeah, sort of related to what you were just talking about. So like, let's say like I took a class last term and was sort of on like language processing, like I have like some data that I already started processing, but like have it woven into like a story format or like need great visualizations on, like could you build off of that and then like in the notes section be like, I decided this in another class and I'm like developing it further, or is that like not okay to start this for like a different thing? It's just in theory. I'm not sure that's something I would even do.
Yeah. Yeah, you could certainly build off stuff from other classes. You just want to make sure you're like, for this class, the work that would count would be like the new stuff you did, not the previous work. So you can't double, like according to the, you know, Dartmouth academic code, you can't double count work for different courses. But yeah, if there's some question that like you didn't get a chance to dig into with another course, then or I've even had students look at their own thesis data in a new way that's like not directly related to their thesis, but maybe like could be an interesting side direction or something like that. That's all fine and legit. Yeah. By the way, Akia and Sarul, I can't see you, so just speak out if you want to say anything. Because I have your window blocked, but okay, sounds good. Both of you.
So next Friday will be the last day of class, isn't it?
Next, so a week from Monday, I think, is the last.
Oh, so the week
Yes.
after the Monday.
Yes, and then I had said you'll have until I think it's March 15th to finish up your stories and whatnot. So does anyone have any ideas about story or like data sets you want to look into or whatnot? Yeah. Allison and then Emily. And then...
Yeah, so we were working together actually.
Oh, okay.
You want to talk about it or?
Yeah, I guess like one data set, I was looking at the awesome public data sets and one that's interesting. Because I'm from New York State, there was like one of like New York State like testing scores for grades 3 through 8.
Yeah.
And like they had different school districts, and they had like how to perform on these different social factors with demographic factors. And I thought that would be cool to dig into, because those were like test sites like when I went to like middle school and elementary school, so that's kind of interesting to me.
You want to send the data like that she's talking about?
Sure.
So you can look at it.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like.
You want to post it on Slack or?
Yeah, I was just going to you.
Oh, sure.
You want to talk about the other one?
Yeah, we talked about the other ones, but yeah, that one was one like specifically that to me is interesting. I took those tests.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, personal relevance is great. And yeah, testing data. So yeah, so it'll be useful as you're thinking about how to turn that into a story. Like, what's your question, and like what aspects of the data do you want to like dig into? But yeah, the source of the data sounds interesting. Sure. Yeah, definitely.
The other two ideas we had were are you familiar with is everyone familiar with like the Anti-Defamation League?
What?
The Anti-Defamation
Oh,
League?
yes.
So they have they track different hate crimes by take a hate crime, and so they track anti-Semitism, white supremacy, extremist murders, terrorist plots. They also track it by ideology and by state, and then from the years 2002 to the present. So we were thinking so one idea was there was last year on campus, there was the shooting of the menorah at Dartmouth. So we could look at how the anti-Semitic incidents in New Hampshire changed over time, like, is that unique, is that a unique case to this area, or is that a thing in New Hampshire, or comparing to other college towns? So I guess one idea could be like looking, compared to different counties across the state, another could be looking at changes over time. And then another idea could also be like looking at like incidences of anti-Semitism versus like white supremacy versus other types of hate crimes, and like seeing how those are connected.
Yeah, that sounds interesting too. I think the of the two, so you mentioned like looking basically over space or over time. I think over time is going to be more, well,
We had one other idea, but those are.
my gut is that over
Yeah.
time is going to be useful because there might be general patterns, particular locations have more or less kind of hate or expression of hate. And but I don't know, I think something about how things change over time, maybe in response to world events or something like that, could be, that seems interesting. Seems like a promising direction too.
And then the last, well, okay, I guess one of that, so we were trying, another other thing that would be interesting to look at, if we went with anti-Semitism specifically, would be like the Jewish population in all these different areas. We were having a hard time finding that. I don't give any ideas of where we could find that. We could find it at the state
Yeah.
level, but not at the county level. And also like New
Yeah.
Hampshire is not a particularly Jewish area, so like it's not like a
Yeah.
Jewish suburb or something that's gonna have more information. Or maybe that's it.
Yeah, well, I don't,
I mean, I guess.
yeah, maybe there's some data source that tracks, like you could look at synagogue enrollments or membership or something, but
Okay.
as a proxy. Well, for like, you could look at college, like Hillel enrollment or something like that. Maybe they have data.
I guess I think what Emily went at yesterday is kind of a good point. Like if you compare like Dartmouth to Columbia or something, it's probably not a fair comparison because we're in the middle of nowhere. Columbia's in New York City. So I don't know if like comparing other college towns is totally a fair comparison point.
Well, I'm just trying to think of what
Well, like,
organizations
I don't know
might
if,
track that sort of
yeah.
thing, because
I don't know if like it'd be better to do like the state as a general instead of different colleges.
yeah, I mean, that's fine. I was just trying to think of like, I can't remember if religion is on the census even, but it
Okay.
probably is. But yeah, so I guess census data would be another potential source, but
Okay. And then I guess if we looked at white supremacy, you could just look at like race data.
I guess, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, but yeah, well, often anti-Semitism also falls under the white supremacy umbrella.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah, it might take some Googling to figure out like what the numbers include and what numbers you might have access to, but yeah, I mean, I don't know of data sets off the top of my head, but
Mhm. And then the last idea we had was Pew has a lot of really good surveys.
Mhm.
They have I'm using Pew for a different class, but one study I'm not using from Pew, they have a religious landscape study. So it basically talks about like the number of adults of a certain religion over time. And I think they also have by state as well. So they have that one. I think they also have it in terms of, I'd have to figure out how to exactly download it in the CSV format, but if I'm using like a Pew study but looking at a different question set of the class, would that be acceptable to use the same data set? Because it's like a huge, like, survey?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep, that's fine.
I guess also the last question would be, for any of these, like, should we try to pick a topic that has more of like a call to action or some, like, something you can get to be able to take away from it, or it's just informing
Well,
itself enough?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think you want to leave the viewer with some sort of take-home message,
Okay,
but it could be, this topic is interesting.
okay,
So I've had students in the past, like, look at their own Fitbit or Apple Watch data. That's not going to have like a universal like message there, but maybe there's some kind of interesting pattern that might make people think about their own like physical activity or sleep or stress or et cetera,
okay.
or mental health. So, or it's like, this is an interesting way to look at data, like that could be a message. It doesn't have to have like, okay, climate change is like killing our planet. We have to fix it. We all live on the planet, so it matters to everyone. And here's what you should do to fix climate change. I mean, that's useful, but that's not the only type of message that's going to matter.
That is helpful. Thanks.
Fanri and then Kareem.
I have like two simple ideas, like one is like technically easier, so maybe I will finish that one and upload it next week.
Sure.
That is about like color theory. So
Hmm.
actually, because I had an art minor and I was in French art school during the pandemic, because I could not travel to US for my master's program and I was locked in France.
Huh.
So I practiced like oil painting and printmaking.
Is that where you made those pictures that you had with your earrings
Yes.
story?
Yes.
Yeah, that's cool.
And for me, it's like, well, actually, like for the for the colors, like we don't only have like a red, blue, and yellow. Actually, like for artists practice, we have like a cool color and a warm color. So we always have like a cool red and warm red, cool blue, warm blue, and for yellow, that's the same thing. Like it's not always like blue is always cold and red is always warm. And I just want to look at like the set of oil paints that's in the market, like how much warm color they have, how much cool color they have, and do they have like a warm and cool color for each, like the primary color, and what's kind of like their choice about the warm and cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that sounds neat. I mean, when I picture, like, I don't know anything about color theory. When I picture like warm colors, I picture like more kind of reddish, like mixing in. And when I picture cool, I picture like whites and blues and that sort of thing. But maybe that's not accurate. And I think it was Da Vinci. There's some like famous artist from like the olden times that said something like, I can take any color and make it seem like any other color if I control the surrounding space of the painting, which is just a cool idea. In a past research life, I used to study something called color constancy, which is like how you perceive a particular color in different like environments or lighting situations and that sort of thing. I always found that really fascinating because the set of wavelengths that land on your retina, which is like what your brain has access to, changes under different lighting conditions, but your subjective experience is that like the same object looks the same regardless of the lighting that's around it. But yeah, so I don't know it'd be interesting to know if like, pick any arbitrary color and say like, under what circumstances is this warm or cool, or like, is this just universally a cool color or a warm color? Yeah, sounds interesting. And I mean, I'd love to learn more about it. So I'd be interested in that topic.
And the other one, like natural language processing, I'm planning to do because I'm now like looking at like the emails I wrote to my old supervisor in Germany. I want to see like my German ability is getting worse and worse ever since I left Germany like 4 years ago. So I may look at it, or maybe I will look at like the 2 primary texts I have for my master thesis. But they will be in medieval languages, so that would also be a challenge for me to analysis. Especially like I don't know so well about like the grammatical structure in the old languages. I haven't read it like systematically.
Sure.
I will see like which one gives me like more fruitful results and make it in a video.
Yeah. So if you have a lot of text, then that's in the same language, then you can train model. I can show you how to train a model that will get out like, the different themes, for example, even if we don't understand the language ourselves. So that's one approach. Pre-trained models are hard to find for particularly like obscure languages. So, the maybe 50 most commonly spoken languages on Earth, it'll be easy to find models. But if it's like some medieval language, my guess is there's not a pre-existing model, because it especially if no one speaks it in 2022. So you probably won't be able to make use of pre-trained models. So that limits somewhat the scope of what you're going to be able to do. But you can still do things like, count up the uses of different words and that sort of thing. So that could be interesting. Sure. Kareem, yeah.
So I have 2 ideas, but both kind of, well, one of them, I just found this data set and I think it's pretty fun to like, so there's a data set about salaries, but the locations are Bangalore, Pune, Hyderabad, New Delhi, and Mumbai.
Huh.
And so the job titles that they have in the data set are like data scientist, data science associate, whatever. So what I was like planning on doing is I could filter out the data set into the 5 different locations and then drop all of the job titles that aren't, I don't know, data scientist, because I think that might be what I want to do in the future. And then just kind of, because then they have a company list, like, and all these companies are like the same companies that you have in the States, but the only thing is the salary is in whatever currency is in the located place. And I would just, I don't know, I was thinking I'd sort all the values and then kind of just have like a representation of like what companies pay you the most or the least in each city. And then if I feel like I can do more, then maybe I could like introduce another variable to like something like completely unrelated. I could probably get it on the internet of like just like normal GDP in the city or per capita income and see if it correlates.
Yeah, that could be interesting. You could imagine like a map where you color each country according to like, if you say, if you want to work as a data scientist in like every country on Earth, which, and then you could pick like 10 companies or 5 companies, which company should I work for? And maybe the answer changes by country. So like maybe in the US, like, let's say Facebook has the highest salaries, then, but maybe in Canada, Google has higher salaries or something like that. Yeah, that could be neat. So you could have some, see if there's any sort of interesting pattern there.
Right.
And then also, yeah, I also like the idea of, for a given company and for a given role, you could color each country according to like the, relative to the average per capita income or the, median or something like that. What's
So,
the data science salary?
my issue would be then, since they only provide 5 like cities in very particular places.
Yeah.
Do you think it'd be easy to find such data about like salary per?
You could look at like Glassdoor. Maybe they have a data set, or is it hired.com? I think there's another H one. I'm blanking on it. Yeah, but if you look at, or maybe, yeah, LinkedIn is a good idea too. Yeah, so any like, there's some other one I'm blanking on, but yeah, any company that's like, runs a website where there's like salary data posted, maybe they have some sort of public data set. It could be interesting. You could also look on, that sounds like something that Kaggle would.
Yeah, that's where I'm looking right now.
Okay. Yeah, so there might be some interesting stuff there.
So that one was kind of random. The other one that I have, and I'm definitely thinking of doing is, I found data on every major league soccer team. So I was gonna, so they have 3,304 inputs, which is like each one's a player, and they have a position, the club, the number of points, the games they played, goals scored, minutes, games, and just all these little things. So what I was thinking of doing is like checking, sorting all the values of like, rather than just like goals scored, because that's what they have right now. I do goals scored per shots taken, or I could do goals scored and assists, since they're both quite important. And then I can also do things where I would sort it between whether position has something to do with how many goals you scored, or I could also do games played in minutes. And you probably see a correlation, but you probably have a couple of outliers that have played way less minutes than other players that have scored just as many goals, and that could be a way of ranking like who's doing the best in the league rather than just like looking at the numbers.
Yeah, that sounds cool. It's also like an interesting, like sports stats are often framed in a player-centric way. So like, is this a good player? Is this not a good player? But, and maybe that's reasonable. But then there's also like the context in which a player is playing. So like, it's like if you put like a really awesome player against other really awesome players, they might not have, their stats might not be quite as good.
Right.
Versus if you have like a professional soccer player versus like a team of middle schoolers who are just learning to play soccer, then you can have the worst professional soccer player in the world, and they're still gonna like have awesome stats for that game.
And I think by doing that, what I could also do is see how, like, let's just say if I rank all these players in like new, with new standards or new variables, then I could see whether or not there's a correlation between, let's just say, the best player in the league being the best player in the league, because from the top 10 best players, like 4 of them are in this club. And so that would probably affect his performance if you have more than just one good player on the team.
Yeah, that's interesting. You could also like see which players are similar that might not otherwise be similar. So there's an interesting type of analysis called a clustering analysis, where you kind of group observations that have similar feature values. So if the feature values in your case are like soccer statistics, then you could see like, whether there are particular clusters that emerge. So like this group of players tends to have these stats. This other group of players tends to have these stats.
Would it be like a math type of analysis?
So what type of
Would
this?
it kind of look like, because I took a class about social networks and we did cluster analysis, and it kind of like grouped people by certain variables, but it was like gave you a map at the end of the thing you're talking about.
You could make a map. What I was thinking of is like, if you think of each feature as like a dimension in some space, let's say there are 3 things like, I don't know, number of shots taken, number of goals scored, and I don't know, number of wins or something like that. So those are your 3 axes of your plot. Now, every player is going to be a different dot in that space. And what I mean by clustering is like dots that go close to each other in that space are going to be players that have similar stats. And then in the general case, you might not just have 3 features that you're looking at, you might have a dozen or 1,000. But you can do the same sort of kind of grouping analysis. You won't be able to make a plot directly, but we have tools for that I can point you to.
I think when I said map, I meant graph. Does that sound?
Like a network.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was something like, kind of like this, because that's kind of what I was visualizing. And would I be able to do something like that on Plotly?
Yeah, we could.
Right.
I don't know if Plotly specifically, but we can
Yeah.
make network plots. There's a package called Network X that's really nice. And then also there's a, let's see, Python D3. I think it's just called Pi D3 or something like that. Yeah. D3 is like a visualization library in JavaScript, but there's this library Pi D3 that is like the Python version of that. And you can make really cool network plots with that library.
And we're not allowed to use anything but right?
What were you thinking?
R. or Style.
I'd prefer you use Google Collaboratory. You can insert our code into Collaboratory. So there are different packages for like allowing you to do that. So run our code in Collab. Yeah. So there are ways to do that. So that's fine, but your final shareable product should be a notebook that someone can run. The reason the notebooks all run on Google Colab is it's like a universally accessible platform that doesn't require any setup. Lisa, yeah.
I'm not sure I can do it, but I would like to introduce the paper I said that kids who was interested, like your paper. So I would like to create memory trajectories when an individual, or I know some of the individuals are subjected to seeing a movie or like my idea would probably, it would be too hard to do. Would be understand how to create these trajectories and then try to replicate the same technique to a different experiment, but it seems like hard, like instead of maybe subjecting a sample of individuals to seeing a movie, they, I don't know, have to make a choice. I don't know, you have a big decision to take. And, so you take a sample of individuals, they have to make a decisions, like you have to like pick an item in a set, and in a sense, I suppose, this can be applied, but I'm not sure. So it's like maybe to understand.
So you watch a movie and then you describe what happened, and then at the end there's like some number of objects you have to pick between or something like that. I don't think I'm following the last piece.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to read your paper, understand your paper, and try to replicate, if I can, the trajectories. So as I can understand experiment data, so people watching the movie, and then you make the people recall the movie and you create the trajectories based on data.
Sure.
The same technique but applied to a different context. So instead of making people watch the movie and taking data from the movie, I would like to come up with my own idea, but the problem is finding it.
I see. So yeah, let me see if I can pull up that that paper that you're talking about. So yeah, so what Elise is talking about is in my lab, we ran this experiment where, well, actually this was a data set we didn't collect, but someone collected it, where people, were watching a movie and then they described what happened in the movie. And we use natural language processing models to come up with this kind of mathematical description of what happened at each moment in the movie, where the spatial location of different dots is related to how similar what's going on at those moments were. So if you have dots that are close to each other, that means the stuff that's happening at that moment, those moments of the movie are similar. And then what you get out is this kind of shape that describes how the content of the movie changes over time. And then you can also have someone describe what happens in the movie and compare the shape of someone's description, which might look similar or different or slightly distorted to what the original movie looked like. And then you can use kind of the match between those shapes as a memory metric. So what's required to kind of make these shapes is just text. So you need a document of text. And then, so if you have conversation data, like someone talking about a decision they're going to make, or a movie transcript, or a story, or yeah, anything like that.
Which kind of data should I get? For example, considering the same example, but instead of the movie, someone telling a story, just very, very parallel experience.
Mhm.
Then the person may record the conversation and we may induce the individual to speak about the conversation. Then we can, what kind of data would you specifically need? I guess we can.
So it'd just be the text of the transcript of what they're saying. So just, if someone's speaking, it would just be so that might be an audio recording, and you'd need the text of that recording.
So we would have just the words.
The words, yep.
The words with the words in the story.
That's one thing we could do. Yep, sure.
And then from the words, how can we get?
Yeah, I can show you. I can send you a link of with actual code, but that's something we could. Yeah. So
the first step would be at this point, once again, reading and understanding the data, right?
yes, and I'll post a link to the code here in our Slack. Oops. Oh, no, there's not a typo. Okay. Yeah, so this GitHub repository has all the code for making those figures and applying and training the models and that sort of thing.
And with the knowledge that till now I can understand the code.
I think so. If not, then I'm happy to help. Yeah, Alex.
We made a story that involves the number of hours of sunshine per se.
Huh.
Some data on that, and I was considering trying to correlate it with the world happiness index.
Huh.
And see if there's a trend there. Then maybe if there's a conclusion of what city you should live in every month of the year.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, that sounds cool. If there's not a correlation with sunshine. Well, there's
Well,
one of the
actually, not
Scandinavian
really.
countries is supposed to be like the happiest,
Exactly.
and they also get very little sunshine. Well, I guess during the winter.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But maybe it's Denmark or something, I forget which, anyways. Yeah, but maybe there's a correlation. Yeah, that sounds really cool.
Could you look at purchasing patterns of like sun lamps, or is that for the time?
That's cool too. Yeah, maybe,
I don't know if that exists.
I don't know either. I've never looked, but that sounds interesting. Yeah, and that could be a really neat thing to explore too, even if you don't find anything, you could say, here's what I think, I feel happy when I'm in the sun. And maybe there's there's a whole industry around like sun lamps. But there's something, it's like daylight replacement therapy lamps or something. Yeah, so someone thinks it's important. There's apparently a market for it. So, is there actually a correlation between how much sunlight and happiness? And then you could see.
Yeah.
There's also like people can say they're happy, but there's a few years ago, there was an interesting there's another group who looked at happiness, and they were looking at the idea that like people in New England versus California, and who is actually happy. And I think they found like people in California and people in New England both think that people in California are happier, but actually they're about the same level of happiness. But yeah, anyways, there could be misconceptions that are interesting too.
And I really like playing around with chloroplasts with Vermont data. But that, of course, use the JSON files, and then also FIPS codes. Is there a corollary to the global FIPS?
Yeah, yes. Yep. There are different countries don't necessarily have the same breakdown of what we call a county in the United States might look different in other countries, but you can at least break down at the country level. So there's certainly that.
Okay.
And then if a country has the equivalent of states, then most times you can, find the geographic boundaries of that. Yeah. So that's something I can help look for too. Kareem, did you have a question or?
I was just gonna ask, if you found a data set on Taggle?
On Taggle? I truly just Googled this, or actually, I went through the class data. It was on data, which I don't know how I got that. I'm going back in the history. Oh, yeah, just daily hours per location data set. Because I was in somewhere else and saw something about daylight. Turns out it was about a software called Daylight.
Because I just found a data set called World Happiness Report in 2019, and it doesn't have the light, but it has like how ranked they are by happiness, GDP, social support, and a bunch of other indicators.
Cool. And then Frank and then Emily.
So, I'm not just sure, doing some research on sleeping. It's just a very broad topic to start with. I'm not
Sure.
what I'm doing, like some behavior, like sleeping when, deprivation or late behavior, or if sleeping behavior is correlated with any of mental or physical performance or diseases, cognitive. Yeah, but I've got a list of all the data sets.
Huh.
But
Yeah, that sounds neat. You might need to, yeah, well, I guess the depth you can go into that question is going to depend on how granular your data set is. So if you have per person measures, then you might be able to like draw conclusions at the person level. You might have like, but if you have like per country measures, there's going to be a lot of confounding factors. But that's not necessarily a deal breaker, but you know, but yeah, that sounds interesting. And sleep is super important, and all kinds of mental health or things or like factors or things that influence mental health, including sleep and exercise and stress, et cetera. Those are all like super relevant topics and, you know, really important for and timely. So, Emily, did you have?
Yeah, I had like two quick questions. I guess one was related to what Alex was asking about the maps. Would that need to be like included in whatever data set you're using, or like if you have things about location, you can then like merge it with like the codes after?
Yeah, you can mix and match across
Okay.
data sets.
So then the second one was, I know like we discussed like re-editing or the assignment 4. Would that have to be like new data then, or can you use the same data and like come up with a different like story?
Yeah, no, you can use the same data set. You could use the same data set for all 3
And like
stories.
the same kind of code we already did, like we already like did a lot of code, we didn't include all what we analyzed.
Yeah, if you wanted to hand in what you handed in for assignment 4 and use that for a different story,
Yeah.
and then just do a separate assignment 4, that's
Yeah,
fine.
this is what like I'm asking is like, so we have a lot of, we did a bunch of analysis for it, but like we didn't include all the analysis in our video, because like some of it wasn't like meaningful or whatever.
Yeah,
like,
you could also redo
can
it.
we
That's
have to
fine.
recode, or can we use the stuff we already coded, like the graphs we already coded for that? Because like we already made like a lot of maps and stuff, we didn't show all in the video, or a lot of
Oh,
graphs.
yeah, but it's in your notebook.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's fine.
and some of them could overlap between the two.
Yeah, of course. Yep. Yeah, you can just, yeah, you just,
Tell a different story with the graphs and like add more graphs.
yeah, each story counts for 1 submission, but you can build on other students' code. You can build on your own code. You have to make it clear to me at least what story you want to count for what submission. So if you want to switch that, then just let me know. But yeah, that's fine. And I think it would work well for, yeah, for one of the part 2 data stories. So that's, yeah, that sounds great. All right, so we are out of time for today. Hope you have an awesome weekend, everyone. And we're gonna again be in person next week. Assuming no major COVID spike, but as of this morning, there wasn't. So, but yeah. And then, as I mentioned, it's gonna be a, relatively informal thing. So if someone submits a story before Monday, we'll talk about that first.